Hey everybody, it's Bill with Mammoth and Flash, and thanks for tuning in today to learn about Notion at work and how we can manage your projects to align your team and get everybody moving forward together. So just some housekeeping at the beginning. I'd love to know, where are you from and what do you do? So go ahead and let's chat it up in the comments. Throughout today's webinar, I'd love for everyone to be vocal and ask questions. We'll spend the first part of our webinar showing you a simple way for you and your team to manage projects together and to make sure that you're moving your work forward. So that way you stress less and you feel good about the work that you're getting done. Make sure that you upvote comments that you like to see answers to. What's up, John? Hey, Chris from London, Brandon, Eric. Cool. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll give it a few minutes for everyone just to jump on. If you do have any questions that you would like to see answered, then I will answer them as we're going throughout today. John, I'm from Michigan as well, and the snow this morning was a great surprise, wasn't it? Little cold, but hey, loving it. Anybody else have snow this year yet? I don't know if our California friends will get to experience any of our lovely snow here in the Midwest. Not yet. So a little bit about me is I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Michigan, and I was born and raised here, but I love traveling all around, especially in the wintertime. Going to sunny states like Arizona and Florida is definitely what it's all about. So just to get started off with my background is I worked for a company called Quicken Loans. They're one of the nation's largest mortgage lenders. And part of what Quicken Loans has done is they've helped really with the renaissance of making downtown Detroit a thriving, safe place to really grow and build businesses. And so I was able to work with Quicken Loans and their parent company, Rock Ventures, to help build some businesses and streamline some of their internal processes through designing internal software for them. And then I eventually ended up starting a company inside of the Quicken Loans. They call it the family of companies. There's about 100 companies that they have. And I was able to start a internal team member system to where it made it as easy to find anybody in their 17,000 person organization as a Google search is. So you can find anybody by their skills, the projects that they've worked on. So that way you could really leverage the talent who was around you. So that way you can move your work forward better together. All right, so what we'll be doing today is, can't see your screen. Let's fix that for you. So I do have just the video going right now, but I'll share my screen so that way we can see everything. All righty. So screen is being shared right now for you. Bad resolution, says David. Hopefully it'll catch up for you. If anybody else has any resolution issues or anything, let me know, and we'll get that fixed up. Cool, thanks for letting me know, Chris. All right, there we go. Apparently it would not screen share when I'm in full screen, so we're good to go. All right, so I'm going to jump over to we went through a little bit about me. So today we're going to go through a Notions database on how you and your team can manage all of your projects and your actions together. So this is our workspace with one of my companies, and we designed this workspace to be flexible enough to take on really any sort of work. And so what we're going to do is I'll show you a little bit of what we've engineered our Actions workspace to be like. And my goal is to inspire you with how you can use Notion to design a workspace for your team. Because as we know, every company, every organization is a little bit different, and throughout different stages of your company's growth, whether you're a solo entrepreneur, you're at 2 people, or you have a team of 50, Notion is flexible enough to be able to work with any size team. And so my goal is to really educate you on how you can use Notion to design a system that works for you and your team with the stage of business that you're in today. So let's just start off with this actions database. We're going to go from top to bottom here. And for any database in Notion, you can add a description here. And so that way you can tell your team members a little bit about what this workspace is about and guide them through the essentials of using Notion. So this is all of our team actions and our projects go here. So you can assign work to some of your team members, or you can just add work that you know that needs to get done. You can use views to visualize your work. So some people, we're visual learners. We like to see like the board style. So progression from left to right. So like, what do we need to do? What are we doing? And what needs to get done? Some people like to see a table view, which is what we're looking at right here. And so we just have a nice simple list to be able to see all of the work that we have done. And going into our views here is I've created a handful of different views as examples. Now, what I encourage you and your team to do is play around with some of these different views and create views that work best for you and your team. And I encourage our team to always be vocal about different views that we need to work with, because if we're not using a view, it just kind of gets in the way and we want to get rid of that. Or if there's a better way for us to visualize our work, so that way we can work better together, our team is empowered to always be saying something, so that way we can improve our processes. Just as a quick note, as I'm screen sharing, I cannot see any of the questions. So I'm just going to jump back over here. All right, reloaded. Sweet. So everyone's able to see. So here we go. All right, so looking at our Notion views here, our first view is assigned to me. Now, the assigned to me is only showing me the action items or the projects that I'm actually, that I own. Because while our team has a lot of different things going on, I don't really want to be distracted with what everyone else is working on. And so I have this assigned to me. And then at other times is I do want to see what other team members are working on and what we're working on this week. So we're going to click on Team Week right here. And now we'll see a little bit of a different view. The cool thing about views in Notion is that we can change any of the properties that we want to see. We can change the status. We can change basically everything. And what we're going to do once we've gone through this sample database is we're going to start from scratch and we're going to make our own. So that way you really understand just how dynamic Notion is and how you can use Notion to design a system that works well for you and your team. So here's our Team Week example. We have statuses. So whether it's a new item that needs to have a little bit more detail added into it. This is a next up item. So maybe it's you've kind of figured out the planning and the details. You've assigned who is responsible to own the project. You've added timelines and due dates, but it's not ready to be worked on yet. So if you're familiar with doing sprints, if you're an engineering or development type of a company, you would have new would be your backlog, and next up would be something that's ready to be worked on, but you're maybe prioritizing it for a sprint that's next week or something like that. Our actions here are going to be whatever the project or whatever the action item is. Now you'll see that we can open up these items. I'm going to get to that in a quick minute because a cool thing about Notion is every single item, you can nest pages or action items or another database inside of it. So that way you have flexibility to work on different projects as we go. We have our timeline here. Now we can see that we have our timeline of November 8th. And then we also have timelines of November 7th through November 13th. So by clicking here is if you have a project that's going to take, maybe it takes a week, maybe it takes a few days, is you're able to set a duration. So that way you're able to understand your workload isn't just like a static single due date like some other project management systems give you. So that's super nice. We can also add reminders. So if we want to be reminded on the day of the event or one day before, if we want to give ourselves a little bit of a heads up, we can just click on day of event and it defaults to 9 a.m. And now we can see if we click off of it that it's blue and we have the little reminder clock. So that's saying that, hey, we're gonna remind you once November 7th hits. So that way you make sure that you know that this needs some attention. Going over to our owners is, let's use our example of due this week. All of our items is really we want to assign somebody who's responsible to own the scope of work. And so here we have a handful of different team members in here. And let's say we're going to have Lainey own this example. You can add different team members to your action items. So just depending on what your project looks like, we always recommend have one project owner. So that way that one person is responsible to make sure that that project is completed on time. And then we have our teams. And so this is just some simple teams. So sales, marketing, operations, HR, and creative. So your team with whatever stage of business that you're in is going to be changing. And so you might have some different teams in here. And that's another cool thing about Notion is it's dynamic, so it works how you work. Switching to a team board view is the board view. It was popularized by Trello, as most of you might have heard. And the awesome thing about Notion is that we can switch between all of these different views and have access to the same scope of work. Now, this team board, you'll see that there's a handful of different new action items. We can see that we have Notion at work. We have this example assigned to Kyle here. And then as we go down our pipeline, we have new, we have next up, in progress, and in review. So here we could take example A, just click and drag. We can drop it anywhere in here, and it's going to change our action item. So that way you can move from left to right throughout whatever your process is. And here we'll see Notion at work, manage projects. That's actually what we're talking about today. And you'll see that there's a little comment on here. So that's just saying that there's discussions and comments actively happening inside of that item. And so that way you can understand what needs your attention at a quick glance. Going to our next view is we have the calendar view. The calendar view is super helpful to understand your team's workload, what's coming up and what's due and when it's due. So if we look at this calendar view, it's based on our timeline. And so we can see today is Wednesday the 6th, and Kyle's action item in review was scheduled for Monday through Sunday. Or we have this Notion action item, which is the project that we're working through today. And we can click on that and we can open it up. We see a little discussion item here that says, hey friends, welcome to Notion at work. And we'll dive into more of the discussions and comments as we go forward. So I just clicked right off of that and it closes it out and goes back to our view. One super helpful view that we use often is because we have a lot of incoming action items, but they don't always have somebody assigned to own them right off the get-go. So we want to create a filter that lets us see all of the unassigned action items. So that way we can make sure that we put a timeline to it, we assign which team is responsible for it, and we assign the owner. So here's an example for unassigned. Let's add a timeline of, let's say it's going to start on Thursday and it needs to be done by Tuesday the 12th. As you can see, our timeline goes in right here. This example is going to be for our sales team. And so we're going to have the owner be Jesse. And now you can see that that action item just went away. And that action item went away because it now has an owner responsible to it. And we designed that in the view. And so I'll take you through and I'll show you exactly how we designed this entire actions database. Our second to last item is the done view. Now, we have our statuses, new, next up, in progress, in review, and done. Anything that's marked as done is we hid it from all of the other views that we went through, because I don't want to see my done items and assigned to me, because that's just extra distractions that I don't really need to know exist. But I do want to have a source of truth, a place of historical record that I can go and I can understand when was this action item done, and we have a property in here that says when was it last updated. So you can see I last updated it yesterday in the afternoon, who the owner was, which team it was, and when was it due. Cool. And then we have our last view, which is all. So sometimes this is helpful if you're trying to get a quick glance at the work that you need to do or the work that's coming up, and you just want to see everything. So we can see who the owners are, we can see which teams they were, timelines, and all that good stuff. All right. Cool. All right, I just jumped back over, just reading through the comments to see if we have any questions, make sure everything's going smoothly. Yeah, and as we go, as you see different things that we've discussed, if you have any questions on like, oh, I wonder if I could do that, or I wonder how this works, just go ahead and add them in the comments, and then we'll be answering all the questions at the end of the next part of this, which is where we actually design our actions and projects database. Cool. So jumping back over to Team Week, I actually just remembered one crazy powerful thing with Notion, and that is going into our projects here. So when we click on open on this example project brief, we'll see that we have our status, we have who our owner is, which team it is, when it was created, and when it was last updated. Now, I designed all of those. I chose all of those to be here. And as we scroll down, we can see a lot of questions that are in this project brief that we need to answer. Now, this is something like, what are we working on for this project? What are our goals and objectives for this project? Who's our target audience, our timeline, our budget. And as with a lot of work that we end up doing as an organization, it's a lot of systems and processes that are just repeated over time. Now, how silly would it be if you had to go in and you have to highlight everything and copy it and paste it for every single time? With Notion, they came out with this super awesome feature to where we can create page templates. Now, a page template is something that you, in your team, you design and you add in all of the content. So, for example, we're going to, instead of clicking on new, which when we click on new, we're going to get a new action item. So, example, action item. We can change the status to new. We can say, okay, this example is going to be for Bill because it's just an example, and it's for operations. So here we can click down into the page content, or we can click on project brief, weekly team huddle, or team member onboarding. Let's say, for the sake of this example, we really just need something high level to be done. So we can just start typing right away, and we can say we can mention somebody. So I can say @Kyle, can we do this by next week? And then in Notion, you'll notice a lot of different keyboard shortcuts. So if you tap the slash command, we're going to get our basic blocks that come up. And I'm going to click on a to-do list. Now, imagine the to-do inside of this action item as being a subtask. Just like any other project management system, we can say, do this thing. You can also assign it to a team member or add a due date. So we're going to say, do this thing next Tuesday. And I'm going to ask Kyle to do this. Then as we press enter, we'll get another to do. But we can add any sort of content in here. So as you scroll down, you'll see different types of headings if you need to kind of segment your content.
You can add lists and all sorts of different things in here. We can also add another table inside of a page. So I just clicked on table. We can say test table. And then we have another database that we can create right in here. Now, closing out of that, we're going to start off with a new project brief. So I just clicked on the down arrow here, clicked on project brief, and I'm going to say project X. We don't have a timeline yet because it's just an example. We don't have an owner because it's just an example. But as you see, all of this content is already seeded in there for you. Now, this is so powerful for you and your team to save so much time by not having to redo all of the work and all of your processes for every single project. So you can just go in here and you can just start typing. So you can say, all right, what will this project accomplish? Let's give us some details here. So this is really healthy, especially if your team is growing and you have new team members that you want to empower to share their ideas, is you just tell them, go ahead, click on a new project brief, answer the questions in there. And then once you're done, let me know, and then we'll review it together. So that way you can move this work forward. So now let's say we filled in all of our goals and objectives here. We filled in our target audience, so that way we know who we're speaking to and the voice and tone that we need to use. And let's say my team leader is Ben, and I'm going to type @Ben. Here we go, and I say, ready to review, please, and thank you. Now I just press enter. Now Ben is going to get a notification with this comment, and so he'll be able to come through and review anything in here. Now let's say that Ben has a question or a comment on something specific that we typed in our goals and objectives. What Ben can do is just highlight anything in this page, click comment, and he can say, @Bill, really like the start. Let's chat about A, B, C. And then I'll get a notification. We'll also see that this has something that needs to be done with it. And then we can have a conversation to move our work forward in line versus sending this to sending a document to one of your team members in something like Slack or another team chat tool, but then you lose context of exactly what it is that you need to be collaborating on. Cool, so that was one of our examples of a page template. Moving on to a weekly team huddle. This is a perfect example. If your team gets together on Mondays to kind of review the work that you did last week or to be intentional about the work that you're doing this week, is you can create a weekly team huddle. Now, what happens here is we can say week 45 team huddle, and I track my weeks by just the week number. And so we'll say this is our team huddle. We're going to do this for Monday. And then you notice that I was already set as the owner because I designed that in our project template. And then we have all of the questions that we need to answer here. So we would go ahead and we would review our action items. Once we're done, we can click the checkbox and we know that that was done. We can say, what are some roadblocks that we're finishing or that were blocking you from finishing your work? Was it anybody's birthday? Did anybody do anything exceptionally well that we really want to commend them on to make sure that we're affirming positive habits? We can have all of that ready to discuss as a team. Once we're done with that, we can just click on our status and click on done. Perfect. And then our last example before we dive in and start to build this database is team member onboarding. So as your team scales, there's a lot of different small things that we don't realize that we actually need to get a team member onboarded for. So creating a template for that is super helpful. So we can say, let's imagine that we had Lainey and she's a new team member. This is her onboarding document. Since I'm going to be the person who's onboarding Lainey, I'll click on my name and then I'll click on Lainey here. Our team is HR, and as we scroll down, Lainey now has this as a source of truth for her onboarding. So we can say day 1 in the morning, welcome to Acme Company. We're super pumped to have you on our team and work with you. Then we have a little database in here that says, all right, here's G Suite. We need to set up, we need to invite Lainey to Notion and to Slack. So then just to make sure that we have everything done, you can click account created. Picture is set. So that's something that's important to us and our team, as in a lot of client facing roles, is we want to make sure that our team members are showing their faces, which shows personality, which creates trust. We want to make sure that we have the apps installed for Notion and Slack, so that way we're all on the same page. And then as your team grows, if you have onboarding documents or onboarding videos, you can embed them all in here. So that way your team member uses this as their onboarding checklist. All right, let's jump back over to, I'm gonna just jump back over to chat real quick, see if we have any questions popping up. Cool, looks like we're going smoothly so far. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to create this database from scratch. So from your Notion workspace is you can click on add a page. Go ahead and do that. And we're gonna name this teamwork because I already have actions. And then if you click down on database, you'll see a table, a board, a list, calendar. Now with a database is you can switch between any of these views. So I always like to start off with a table just because it's most like a spreadsheet. And every table starts off with the name column, tags, which is going to be empty for us, files. And so what we'll do is we're going to just say this is example action A. So we'll create a few different examples in here. Now, looking at our action item database is we can right click on any of these column headings, which we call these properties. So if you right click on tags here, you can see how we can rename tags. And so let's name this status. And then our different property types is I recommend investing some time and just playing around with different ways that you can use different properties to organize your work to so that way you can really understand how powerful Notion is and how you can design any database for any type of a project. So for our status is we can do select or multi-select. Multi-select lets you choose multiple teams or items. But for status is we want to change it to select because we only want one status. And with this status is we're gonna click in here and we see that we don't have any options. So we're gonna type new. Then you can either click create new or just press enter on your keyboard. And then the next one is gonna be next up. Enter. And next one is in progress. Next one is in review. And then our last one is done. So now if we click on our status options, is we see new, next up, in progress, and in review. If you need to rearrange any of these, grab this little grabber-do here, and you can adjust the order of anything, which is helpful for when we start to filter our database. So it just quickly is if you click on the dots next to your status is you can choose colors, so that way you can add any colors or whatever you like. You can also add emojis to the end or beginning. So if you want to spice up your workspace, you're totally welcome to do that. You can click the headings here and drag them so that way they're any sort of length and move forward. So just to respect your time as we're going to keep cruising by, our next property type is owner. So I just typed owner here and we're going to go to property type and we're going to select person. Now, when we select person is we have instant access to anybody who's in our database here. So just as an example, I'll change the owner to Bill, I'll change the owner to Kyle, and I'll change the owner to Lainey here. And then our next item is team. And when we add a new property by clicking the plus sign here, is it does default to a text field. For our teams is we want to choose multi-select. And so we're going to choose
We'll type HR, we'll choose creative, operations, sales, and marketing. Now, they did all add to that one database. So let's go ahead. We're going to remove them. And we'll choose creative for one. We'll choose creative, operations, HR, sales, and marketing. And then we'll add timeline. So you can also name it to be due date or really whatever you want to call everything. I recommend being very intentional with your language. And so it's just helpful to train your team to really understand and move the work forward as best as you can. So as an example, we're going to choose this one is the 6th, this one is the 7th, and the 8th. And so there we go. Now what we have is we have a really simple database that you and your team can create your action items in. Now to create some views here is we're going to click add a view. Now we can see we can add a name, we can make sure it's a table, and we have a beautiful example here so that way you know what it is. We can create a board, calendar view, etc. So I'm going to name this view assigned to me. Now we'll click on create and click that drop down, and we can see that we can rearrange our views here. And I always put assigned to me at the top one because that's going to be our default. And to create a filter so that way you only see work that is assigned to you is you can right click on the owner field and click add filter. Then you can see owner here. We want to choose owner contains. And the first option here is me. And so that means that whoever is looking at this view is only going to see anything that's assigned to them. So if you click me, we see that instantly I'm only seeing tasks that are assigned to me. So example D. And when you create a new item inside of assigned to me is we'll see that owner automatically is added there. So that saves us a little bit of time. Our next view is we'll change default to calendar and we'll create a calendar view. So now once we click on calendar is we'll see example action item A. Now you might be wondering, well, we had a bunch of different action items here. Why is there only one? What we can do is click on filter and we want to remove this filter so that way we can see all of the tasks that have due dates. So now we can see example A, B, and C. Now, let's say we want to add some more context because this isn't super helpful to me. Let's click on properties and we can see our toggles for owner. And now I can see the owner. Let's say I can see the status and maybe that's good enough for me for right now. So now I have a little bit more context and maybe Lainey was out sick on Friday. So we're going to drag this over and we're going to have her start that on Monday. So just click and drag and you're good to go. The last view that we're going to create is the board view. So we can say, just name that board, click on board and create. Now this is super cool because you can hide any of these items if you want, or you can drag and move them from side to side if you need to rearrange them. If we click on properties here, you can add a card preview. So that way it kind of shows the beginning part of the content that you have inside of your page. You can also change the card size. I always like to change ours to large just because it gives a little bit more room to be able to read the title. You can add the status, but with this view, it's not super helpful since we have new, next up, and in progress as our headings. You can also change the group by status. So maybe you want to change it to what are action items for each team, or you want to change it to owners. So that way you can kind of understand a workload balance. The most common route is to choose status though, because then you can move work from left to right as it progresses. And so that's super handy. The last thing that I'll show you before we jump into Q&A, which I'm super excited to answer your questions, is we're going to create a template. So click on the down arrow here and we can click on new template. New template is you can automatically add a title, you can automatically add an owner or a status. So for this example, we're going to choose new, and we won't have a team or a timeline because we don't know what it will be. But let's change this to weekly team huddle. And the owner is going to be whoever your team leader is or your project manager is, and our team is going to be operations. So now you can press enter to continue with an empty page, or we'll just click there. And I really recommend diving into keyboard shortcuts, which I can get to at the end if we have time. But you can use Markdown if you're familiar with it, or just use the / command to really learn what's all possible. So here, let's choose heading 1. And so we'll just type week plan, hit enter, and then you can do an open and close bracket to create a to-do. And let's say review at, and we're going to review teamwork. So the cool thing is we can link to people or to any team as well. So here's the teamwork database we just created. And so then I can click right on that, and it's going to go to our main database. Then we'll say schedule actions with timelines. Then we'll press enter a couple of times, and we'll do a new heading for week retro. And we can say, what do we do well? Create a little indentation for a bullet item. And then we can say, what should we keep doing? And you can even have your team members fill this out as well. So that way they can kind of seed in all of the talking points. So that way it's not just one person talking the entire time. And then our last item in our week retro is, what can we do better? And so that way everyone goes in here, and now we have a simple template. So you can see up here that we're editing the template in Teamwork. So let's go ahead and click on back. And now when we click on the drop-down arrow, we can click on Weekly Team Huddle. We can say Week 45 Huddle. It's automatically assigned to Bill. It's in New, and the team is Operations. And we have our template here. So nice and simple. And then if you want to say like at Kyle, at Ben, please add retro items. Thank you. Hit enter, and now Kyle and Ben will be notified to go ahead and add in their week retro action items. So that way, when we get together as a team, we're efficient with our time. And then once you do have all of your views created and you've created different templates, is one thing I recommend doing is going to the top right, clicking here, and click on Database Lock. So now what Database Lock does is it prevents your team from making changes accidentally. For example, is if we click on our drop-down menu, you'll see that we can't create a new template, or we can't edit the template. And if some of your team does want to change any of their templates, you'll see that it's locked up here. And you can click to unlock it, quickly make your changes, and then relock it to make sure that it's all working smoothly. So that is the basics of creating a teamwork database inside of Notion. The last thing before we jump into Q&A is to invite your team, is to get your team inside of Notion. So in the top left here is click on Settings and Members. And we can see all of our members in here. And you just click on Add a Member. It's nice and easy. Type in their email address. You can click on their level of access, so whether they're a member or they're an admin, which gives them the ability to do things like edit a locked database. Is you can invite them to create their accounts. And then you can also create groups. So with our companies we have different brands underneath the same house. So for you you might have a marketing team and a sales team, and to quickly create permission groups and assign access to certain information is you can create a group, then you can name it, you can add an icon to it, and then add your team members in here. So that's the basics of how to use Notion to manage your projects and to work better together. So let's jump over into our Q&A, and we're going to answer some questions here. Cool. So is there a way to watch later? Thank you, Ben, for answering that. So yep, you'll get an email. And I'm going to switch back to my camera here. Maybe not. And all right, cool. So thanks for hanging in there, everybody. I hope that you were able to learn a bunch of different things. Any questions that you have, myself and Ben from the Notion team are happy to answer them for you. So I'm just going to quickly read through what we have, and I'll show you anything that I can to make sure that you're set up for success. So here we go. Cool. All right, so I'm going to answer, are views tied to users? If I create a view for myself to see tasks, will the entire workspace see the view? So in our Assigned to Me view, so let's click over to our Actions board here, and we're going to click on Assigned to Me. Only based on the filter that we set up, so I'm going to click on Unlock, so that way I can show you the filter, is the filter says the owner contains me. So if any of your team members click on Assigned to Me, they will only see items that are actually listed that are assigned to them based on the owner group. Now, that doesn't mean that your team can't see all of your action items, because, for example, as if we click on our filter here, if we click on All, you will see all of the action items in here. So just for historical purposes, so you'll see that this one has Lainey on it, or this one's assigned to Jesse, this one's assigned to Kyle. So it depends on the view that you're looking at, but the views are set up for your entire team, so that way they can click through everything. Let me know if that answers your question. All right. Cool. All right, Kendall. You have several task boards set up in your workspace, but they don't add the views to the sidebar. Yeah, so that's a good question. So let's click on our example actions database. If you click on the little toggle here, you'll see that it opens up. Now, any of the views that you've created, you can click through right in here to make it super easy to know what's available and to switch through anything that you want. A cool thing is when you switch, let's say we switch over to contacts here, and then we go back to actions, it's going to load up the last view that you had selected. You can also switch views by clicking into the main page or database. Click on the views dropdown, and then you can see that we have the same views in the menu open over here as we do over here. So whatever you like. How did you easily add? All right, so how did you easily add an emoji to the end of the status tag? Good question. So depending on the system that you're on, I'm on a Mac right now. And let's say, for example, as we have this assigned to me view, is if you click and hold on your keyboard, Control Command Spacebar, it's going to pop open your emoji menu. You can see some of my most frequently used emojis. And then we can add the click on party. And once we click off, we have our emoji there. You can see it's in the views dropdown and over in our toggle menu as well. On Windows I believe that they have a button on the bottom of your taskbar next to your clock that you can click, which pops open the emojis. It's either like the on-screen keyboard, and your emojis you can load in from there. If you don't see that, just Google add emojis from Windows, and there's probably a shortcut key. Hey, there we go. Chad's got us covered. If you do Windows key plus period, you'll get the emoji selector. Thanks for your help, Chad. All right. How long did it take you to perfect your databases? So this is a good question. And I don't consider any of our databases to be perfect. And so something that I make sure that our team really understands is that everything is evolving because as we grow as an organization, as we take on different types of clients, the beautiful thing about Notion is that it can adjust to whatever the workflow is, because we do have different databases for action items, which are high-level projects. We have a database for all of our marketing content, which if you tune in 2 weeks from now to the 3rd webinar, is I'll show you all of our processes for our content pipeline. And we have a ton of different powerful templates in there, because a lot of marketing work is a bunch of work, but it's all repeated. And so as long as you and your team understand of like, hey, if you see a better way to do something, like always say something and always bring it up, because we always want to be aware of how we can be better, how we can communicate more clearly, or we can always remove things and trim the fat of like what doesn't belong. So I always rope our team into it, and I always ask for feedback. So that way we can make sure that we have a really focused workspace. All right, Emma, really looking forward to this. Me too, thank you. You find yourself struggling to manage tasks resulting from emails. It's fine when there's only a few, but you lose the plot a bit when emails are flying back and forth. I can feel your pain a little bit on that. Now, I tested one way before the webinar started, and that's using the Save Later extension for Chrome. So if you see my screen here, is if we click on Save Later, is it's going to automatically add in the title of the page that we're looking at. You can choose which database you want to add it to. So like Action Simple here, or you can change your workspace if you have different workspaces as well, which I have a handful of them here. So for example, let's pop in email here. Now it's not perfect by any means, but it works at a high level. So we're going to take this email and we'll click on Notion, add later extension. It'll say new features at Honeybook. And it just takes the full page title. We click on Save Page and open in Notion. So what's happening here is typically, if it's a normal public web page, it's going to take all of the data that's on the page and put it inside of your page here. So your content would be here. Since email is private and there are certain permissions that Notion isn't allowed to, which is what you want because we value privacy, is it adds a link to that email. So you can just click on Open Link and it will take you right back to that email thread. So it's not going to be a catch-all solution for you, but it definitely is a way that will work for you. Is there a way to watch later? Yep, so you'll get an email with a link to watch later. And so you'll be able to watch it, share it with your team, and all that good stuff. We'll also send you a link to RSVP for the next 2 webinars, which next week we're talking about how to make a team wiki. And then the week after is we're talking about how to create a marketing pipeline inside of Notion using databases and templates and everything. Sweet. We made it through all of our questions. Oh, here we go. Do you make much use of the relations property in your own workflow? Yes. All right. So I do use the relations property a lot in our workflow. So jumping over to our workspace here. So just for context is I did make this teamwork database for this example. I did create the actions database, for example, but our team is all of our action items are linked here, which is also associated with our outreach, which is a really simple sales pipeline. And then they're also linked to brands that we work with and contacts. So for example, is when I click on Assign to Me, this is our personal pipeline here. Or this is all of my action items. And you can see anything that's unassigned or anything that's complete. And this is really just the simplicity that we need for our team. And you can see that we have a relation to brand here. Now, this is cool because we have multiple organizations that we operate. So one of them is Flash, one of them is Mammoth. But then we can also link to all of the clients that we work with as well, which most of those do go into our content
pipeline since it's a lot of video production work. But for example, let's say that we're going to add a new action item. So we can say test relations. We can click on our timeline of maybe it's Friday. And then if we click on brand here, you'll see some of the different brands that we work with. And so, for example, maybe this one's going to be Under Armour. And you can also add multiple brands if you need to. And so the beautiful thing about this is now if we click on Under Armour, we're now looking at our brands database. So we can see this is like an activation that we're pitching them on, and then any other content or anything like that. Let me choose a better one for you. So let's say Streetwise Partners. We're going to click on their brand relation. So I add icons for everybody just because it makes it be nice and branded for us. It gives us visual separation as well. But you can always add emojis if you want to. And we have all of the content that we've been working on for Streetwise Partners that's linked here. Different docs, so meeting notes or action items are here as well. So yes, we definitely do use relations in our databases. So here we have different brands that we work with, who the account owner is, what our relationship is with them. And so that way we have historical information for everything. Yeah, so we have that. Let me know, Scott, if you have any other questions on using relations in there. We can totally answer that for you. One thing that you could do for your actions database, instead of just using a status or a single select item for your teams like marketing, PR, HR, sales, you can actually create a database called teams, and then you can just add in the teams that you want as the team status. So for example here if we go to our actions database, we're going to switch back to, we'll switch to all. And we're going to click, we'll right click. I'm going to click on insert left. And we'll click on property. We'll say test relation. Now if we scroll down to advanced, this is where you have the relation that Scott asked about. So we can click on relation. So now you can choose which database do you want to be related. So if we had a database called teams, then we could type in teams, and then you would have all of your options there. We do it similar with brands that we work with. So we'll type brands, and then we see our brands pop up right here. We'll click on create relation. And so now we could just click here and we can say, we can click on like Quicken Loans is one of the brands that we work with. And we can do the same thing for WeWork as well. So that way you can kind of relate everything back and forth. Yeah, cool. All right, keep the questions coming. We have 7 minutes. But if we're all done with questions, I really appreciate you tuning in to learn a little bit more about how you can use Notion for you and your team to align yourselves, to work better together. And again, if you do want to learn how to build a team wiki, which is really sharing knowledge, and one part of scaling your organization, especially if you're going from like 1 to 2 to 3 to 10 team members, is sharing the information that is historically inside of one person's head. And it does take a good amount of work, but it saves you so much time because you're creating repeatable processes and you're documenting how you work, why what you do is so important. And so that way you're letting your team, you're empowering your team really with the knowledge to learn partly on their own. And so that way they have a source of truth as well. I'm going to go through, read some of the comments here and see if anybody had anything else that we wanted to answer here. Cool, yeah, it looks like we nailed most of them.
Zip zilch. Looks like a couple people had some challenges, but then it all got cleared up after some refreshes. So what I'm going to do is, if you want to duplicate this simple database, is I did share it. So that's a cool thing about Notion as well, is you can share it with your team or with different people. And so I just created some public access here. So if you do have any questions, you're totally able to click on anything and add some comments. And then you can click on duplicate as a template as well. So I'll click on copy this link, and then we'll jump in here and so example database, boom. And so if you click on that, and if you're not signed in or signed in from a different account, I'll open up an incognito tab here. So you'll see that you have public access here, and you can kind of see all of the different views and everything. But then you can also duplicate this by clicking duplicate in the top right corner. So that way you can kind of repurpose everything for yourself, because sometimes it's not super easy to start off learning and doing everything on your own. So you're totally welcome to duplicate this, add any comments, discussions, whatever it is, and I'll help you out along the way. And then we'll go from there. Here's another question. Cool. Yeah, keep the questions coming. I'm happy to hang out until we've answered all the questions. David, let's see here. Do you share any of your project status with your clients? If so, how? So I've invited very few clients to our docs, but you can. And it's something that we've actually thought about. So with some different event planning, is by being able to invite some of our clients, it can really keep a lot of duplicate back and forth information at a minimum. So for example, that link that I just shared for the example database is you can share any page with anybody. So David, if we're looking at the screen here, let's say we have our next up our Project X example. So if we click on share here, is you can give public access, which it does have public access because I just shared it with everyone who's here. But you can click on invite a person. And I'm thinking if we use our demo email here, you can add any email address. So imagine this is your client. We'll type in your client's email. You can choose the access that you want to give them. If it's your client, I would give them access to comment only. So that means that they can read and comment on things, but they can't actually go through and change your document because you and your team want to be responsible for that. So you click on can comment, click invite, and then your client will get that invitation. So, and when they load up Notion, is they'll only have access to the pages that you invite them to, which is super sweet. Cool. Jessica, let me know if you have any questions. I like that's one of my favorite emojis because why not bring the party everywhere we go? Got to keep it fun. David, if you have any other questions, I'd love to hear them. And if you want to hear anything else, I'm an open book. I love sharing what we've done. Was just wondering if you found a workaround in your flow so a client can only see a project related to them without seeing the entire database. Yeah, so you totally can do that. So with what I just showed you is once we opened up the page in Notion and you click share on that exact document, is they're only able to see that exact page. Now, for example, like you might be wondering, well, can they see like the other people here? Can they see all this other stuff? Or if you have related databases, can they see that stuff? The answer is no. So they can only see exactly what is on that page. So for example, internal action item. So this is my company's internal database. So let's say we're going to add a timeline just to make it fancy. We'll add a brand, which is, we'll just add Notion on here. And it's a low priority. And so this is a test document. So if we click on share, I can click on public access and I can create a link that only you can comment on. Or I could invite you via email. So if it's your client, you can add in their email. You can change their access level. But for this example, I'm happy to share this with the ability to only comment. I'm not going to let you duplicate it. I'm not going to allow search engines. And so now we click on copy page link. And if we paste that here, I'm going to open up an incognito window. So that way, like this is an incognito window. I'm not signed into a Notion account. I click on owner. I only see who's listed on there. I click on brand. Oh, and it looks like brand. It actually removed brand from there. I thought that it added it in, but sorry about that. And then low is it's only showing the information that's on there. Now, if I had a Notion account, I could highlight this and add a comment or add discussions, but I don't have a Notion account on this incognito window. So that should give you a pretty good idea of what you would actually be sharing and give you the confidence that people can actually go back to see anything that's in your actions or projects database. So you are safe there. Jessica, thanks. I've spent a good amount of time in Notion over the last handful of years. And so I'm always kind of tinkering with it. We have a pretty solid flow with how we work together in it now. But I also always love hearing feedback from everybody else as well. If you have any ideas or if your team is doing anything specifically well, they're like, ooh, this really works for us. I always want to hear it because I always love to get better as well. It's 3:01, so that is Eastern Standard Time. And I'm happy to keep talking if anybody has any questions. But if not, I'd love to see you all back here next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Instead of 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the next two webinars are at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You will get links to those webinars in the Thanks for Watching email, which will allow you to watch this later as well. So for that, I'm going to say see you later. You're welcome to message me. I'll drop my email in here if you do have any questions because I always like to be available. But the Notion team is extremely helpful as well. So if you do have any questions or comments or ideas to improve Notion, they actually like to hear ideas because that's just the type of team that they are. So you can always click on the little question icon and click chat with us, and it will pop open an instant chat, and you'll be able to chat with one of their awesome team members. All right, Angela, Ben, Brandon, David, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.